Well, if you came in and you heard anything, if you heard any music playing, I created a Spotify playlist from songs that were top hits in 1988. The problem with that was, right, hindsight 2020, well, David was born in 1988, so he probably didn't recognize any of the songs. But that's okay. I tried. But I think 1988 was an amazing year. I wanted to share some interesting facts real quick before I introduce David. The cost of the movie ticket in 1988 was $3.50. Just let that sit. Yeah. A dozen eggs was 65 cents. A brand new IBM personal computer with, wait for it here, 30 megabyte hard disk, a mono monitor, and 512K memory was $1,300. You could buy a Ford Taurus, which apparently was a big deal in 1988, for less than $10,000. A gallon of gas, want to take a guess? 91 cents. Apparently inflation caught up. Average monthly rent, $400. The average income per year was $24,000, and the cost of a new house was $90,000. Pretty crazy. A couple of other interesting facts. It was also the year that crack cocaine hit the market. And some popular films were Rain Man. Everybody remember that? Oh yeah. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Die Hard, the original. Yes. Beetlejuice. I still have nightmares about that movie. Popular musicians include Enya, right? U2, Michael Jackson's song Dirty Diana, Chicago with Look Away, George Michael's song Father Figure, Guns N' Roses, and a couple others that will go unmentioned. Anyway, you didn't come here to hear about 1988 facts, as interesting as they are. You came here to learn about David Leggett's story. So real quick about David Leggett. He's managing partner currently at Black Airplane along with Michael Caldwell and an amazing team of people here with him to support. Black Airplane specializes in creating apps and websites that win. David started teaching web design at the age of 14 and founded the world's largest user experience publication called UX Booth when he was 18. I really want to go through this entire timeline, but I know you probably don't want me to. Yeah. But I'm going to go through most of it. When he was 14, he started writing Photoshop tutorials, guides, and articles. That blows my mind. My oldest is 10, and I'm not sure she could do that in 4 years. At 15, he started running MySpace resource sites. At 16 years old, he made his first $250,000 in 1 year. Started writing tutorials, guides, and articles for a 3D editor. At 17, he was accepted into the Governor's Honors Program, where he met his co-founders of UX Booth. In 2007, at 18, he started a new company and taught web design and print design. Launched a popular video game website that had 1 million visitors in 1 day. In 19, he started a new company called UX Booth. At 20, in 2009, managed Michael Caldwell's first campaign for State House. Almost won. Close. Bought his first home in cash at 20 years old. At 22, he started providing design consulting services. Joined Python Safety. Helped Caldwell win his second run for State House. And it says that they believe they ran the most transparent and accountable campaign in the country. And I don't know what the statistic is, but I know you were the youngest state rep in the country. Would that make you the youngest campaign manager? I mean, I don't know. All right, we're going to declare that today. And then fast forward to 2015, was a big part of Python Safety, which went on to be acquired by 3M. Summited Mount Kilimanjaro. I'm out of breath thinking about all this stuff. Was married in 2017 to his lovely wife Katie, who's here today in support. Or did she leave already? Okay. He acquired Black Airplane with Michael Caldwell in 2017, started his company here at the circuit, joined the Woodstock Downtown Development Authority on their board, and fast forward to 2018, Black Airplane is growing by leaps and bounds by revenue as well as their team, and they're doing awesome things just here in downtown Woodstock. And so I'm excited to have David's story this morning, and I hope you guys are too, so please welcome David Leggett. A little closer. Check 1, 2. I may have to switch mics with you if that doesn't work. It looks great. Check 1, 2.
7. Any better?
No. All right, you're taking this one.
All right.
Sorry. It's more important that they hear you. Thank you. All right. All right. Check 1, 2. Hey, it was on mute.
That would
There you
matter.
go.
Yeah.
You don't offer any fee services on the side, do you?
No.
All right, I think it'd be fun to start with a lightning round, if we could.
Sure.
I'm going to break the ice a little bit. I'm going to ask some questions, and you just shoot from the hip. No right or wrong answers. We'll let the audience decide. Okay, Star Wars or Lord of the Rings?
Star Wars.
If you could be a Marvel character, who and why?
Iron Man because he's the best one.
Okay. Facebook or Instagram?
Instagram.
Favorite group board game?
Can I say D&D? I mean, it's played on a tabletop.
Okay, for those who don't know,
Requires
please
dice.
describe what D&D is.
Shared storytelling experience. It's Dungeons and Dragons. I'm sure everyone's heard of it at least.
I know our team plays that every night together. So. Favorite Reformation beer?
Oh, that's tough. Warren? Yeah.
Okay. This is a really important one, okay?
Mhm.
Taylor Swift or Adele?
If I don't say Taylor Swift, my business partner will leave me. Yeah.
All right. But is it really Adele? Okay. We'll talk about it. All right, best get in the zone music.
Mostly like instrumental soundtracks from movies.
Okay. HTML or JavaScript?
JavaScript.
Okay. All right, what is one design development pet peeve?
Ask the team.
People thinking there's a right answer because usually there's more than one.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay. Favorite video game console / game growing up?
Halo. Yeah, bar none, Halo.
Halo played on Xbox?
Yep.
Yeah. Favorite vacation spot?
Cinque Terre, Italy.
Awesome. And what is your dog's name?
Luna.
All right.
That's her.
And we're done. Time for questions.
All right.
So for those of you who are new, sometimes I'm bad about describing how this program works, but we usually talk up here for about 30, 40 minutes-ish, and then we turn it over to you guys at the end for about 10, 15 minutes to ask questions of David. So get comfortable and hopefully enjoy it. All right, so we like to start with origins, because I feel like that's great to know kind of the beginning. So tell us a little bit about growing up, what it was like, your background, your family.
So I grew up here in Woodstock, born in Orlando. We moved to Woodstock when I was 4 or 5 years old. I've spent most of my life in this area. I've lived a little bit in Kennesaw and Canton, but always came back to Woodstock in the end. Growing up, pretty normal life. I always was kind of fascinated with electronics and computers. When I was 10 years old, our house flooded and we had to move away for a few months while they dried it out and did repairs. And during that time, my parents decided to buy me some software called Adobe PageMill, which was like really early website builder software, because I knew I liked computers. And I just, when I had free time, I would practice building websites, and I kind of fell in love with doing that. And eventually realized that, I'm pretty good at this. I learned some other skills, graphic design, website design, programming, and thought eventually, maybe I should start teaching this stuff. One of the problems with that is that I had a rule in my house, or my parents had a rule in my house, I could only have 1 hour of electronics a day. So I could watch TV or play video games, which is where I usually wanted to spend that time, or I could build websites. There was an exception to the rule. If I read for an hour, I could get another hour of electronics. So I ended up spending a lot of time reading and then playing video games and building websites.
So you read for like 12 hours a day.
I told them I did so I could get more time. Yeah, I did that and eventually started building websites where I was selling ads, started getting a lot of people to come to those websites. And then one day a check came in the mail for 14-year-old me from Google for $1,000, and my parents decided maybe the hour-a-day rule doesn't really make sense. So after that, I kind of had more time and space to really practice that and get good at that, and the rest is, that's how I started my career.
Wow. And you might want to hold it a little closer.
Sure.
There we go. So, born in Orlando, but now you're still in Woodstock and you choose to be here. So tell us a little bit about why you choose to be in Woodstock, because you literally live, work, and play in downtown Woodstock.
Yeah, I never leave. So I moved to Woodstock 25 years ago. Back when I first moved here, it was mostly just trees. We didn't have, all the businesses and great restaurants and everything that we have today. I made a lot of great friends here growing up. My family was here growing up. There were a lot of opportunities for me growing up here. And I've fallen in love with Woodstock, so it is my home. And this is the place where I think is best for my family to continue to grow. There's so much opportunity and such a great community here. I can't imagine living anywhere else at this time. I love to travel. There's other great places out there, but this is always home. So yeah, love it here.
It's funny. So we talk to a lot of people on our team about whether they're looking to relocate here or start a business here, or growing a business and expanding throughout the county. And it seems to be a common thread. A lot of people almost have trouble putting it into words. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It feels like home. It just feels like this is where my people are. And so
Yeah, I think when you find a special place like this, it's special, and it would take a lot to get me to move anywhere else.
Right. Unless Google sent you a check for $1 billion.
For $1 billion, I'd consider.
All right, so just thinking about learning how to code at such an early age, at 13, starting to teach others at 14, and making $250,000 at 15, which is obviously the exception. Buying your first house at 20 with cash. You've been dabbling in entrepreneurial ideas for half your life. So how would you define an entrepreneur? Because I feel like people define that differently. How would you define it? And then why did you choose to stick with that versus continuing like a college path or a different career path?
For me, at least, I think the decision was probably easier than it is for a lot of other people because I stepped into it at such an early age. I kind of had tasted success already doing something that I never expected to get paid for. But I think for me, it's really all about risk management. So I didn't learn this lesson until way after I had already started companies, but at one point I learned that salary is some of the worst money you'll ever make out there, and if you really want to do well, you need to put more risk in the game. You need to have skin in the game, classic risk reward kind of scenarios. So I think that's true. If you're like me and you want to make money and a lot of money, then the best way to do that is by starting your own business and building something where you could lose everything too. So that's not something that everyone wants to do, or some people might not care as much about that kind of thing as I do. But I've never really had a problem with putting some skin in the game and being willing to lose, and I have lost before. But I've also had some great opportunities. You mentioned it before. We We helped build a company that was acquired by 3M, and we all won a lot there. And now we're not trying to sell Black Airplane, but we're in it for the same reasons at the end of the day. It's a for-profit business. We want to succeed. We want everyone on our team to succeed and do well. And this is what we know how to do.
Yeah. I think I like the way I think Michael, you might say the same thing, but you guys talk about risk and reward. But it's good to qualify that when it comes to entrepreneurship, because I also think there's a lot of myths out there about entrepreneurship, whether people think that you're just going to get rich quick, or you can gain heavy reward without hard work and hustle. So speak to that. I've heard a lot of people describe you as, man, David's really hardworking, and he really hustles. Where did that come from, and how did that become a value?
That would definitely be my parents, is where the work ethic came from. And I think people talk about different things that entrepreneurs do, and for the most part, I kind of shrug at all that, because the only thing that really matters, I think, to an entrepreneur, well, at least that's worked for me, is work really hard, work harder than anyone else around you. And that's all it is. It's not hard to be an entrepreneur, it's hard work, but it's a simple concept. Just work really hard, and hopefully success follows.
Yeah. All right, on that vein too, if you look back over the last 40 or 50 years, the term entrepreneur has gone through some shifts when it comes to how to define it. And so I think a long time ago, you would define entrepreneur as a career path. Like, this is what I do. I don't do this. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to build my own thing. And then it started to shift more into like a skill set. And now it's also becoming more of a mindset. So this entrepreneurial mindset, people who innovate, people who think outside the box, people who creatively solve problems. Do you feel like the entrepreneurial mindset is important overall, as well as when it comes to building a team? You guys have grown from 2 or 3 of you to now almost 10 in about a year or so, year and a half. How important is that to Black Airplane, as well as to your work ethic, to have people around you that have an entrepreneurial mindset?
I have met people that I think are very entrepreneurial, who know how to kind of repeat a process for starting a successful business. They know the ins and outs of running a company. They're masters at what they do. That's not really who I am. I typically find an opportunity, and if it's something that I think I could be really good at, then the way I apply that is just go work really hard at being the best at it, put in extra hours every day, and more often than not, success is followed, thankfully. Sometimes you make a calculated decision and it doesn't turn out well. You kind of lose, and that's what the risk is. It happens. Entrepreneurial mindset, again, for me, is risk management. So if there's no significant reward at the end, then it's not worth the risk. If there's not a real plan for how do we go make this thing successful, there is a business plan up front. There is time spent in spreadsheets saying, okay, does this actually make sense? I like the idea, but where are we going to go find the money to support ourselves and everyone else, all of our employees and their families, because this isn't just about, in our case, Michael and I running a company. We have to make sure that everyone's getting paid every month. So we have a plan going in. We have to adjust all the time. Our original business plan has changed a lot. But yeah, it's like at the end of the day, it's really mostly about just going and working harder than everyone else.
So you started about 10 years ago, 2008, you started UXmove.com with your co-founders. I'm personally fascinated by UX, or user experience, for those who don't know, but can you put it UX in your own words, and then maybe speak to how that applies to general business principles, design, customer experience, that kind of stuff?
So UX stands for user experience, for anyone that's not in this space. When you are building a website, or really designing anything, a building, a garden, whatever, a lot of the design is visual design. How do we make this look aesthetically pleasing, or try to accomplish our goals visually? UX, on the other hand, is the science behind that design. It's the collection of data to kind of validate your hypothesis of the goal that you're trying to accomplish. So if you're building a website where you're trying to maximize how many people are coming on and buying widgets from your website, UX would be collecting data on multiple versions of your website design to see which one's performing the best, and then making more updates and iterations to that best design that is maximizing the number of sales, so that you as a company are improving your bottom line. But there's all sorts of goals that you could have on a website besides just selling something. It could be how many people are watching a video on my website. Are people clicking the buttons we want them to click on our website? Are they learning our story? So UX is really the science behind collecting data and then making improvements to your design to try to improve the conversion rates.
Yeah, the overall user experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure in y'all's work, there's plenty of examples of websites and companies that don't nail user experience, right? What are some examples, or not examples of companies, but what are practical examples? No companies in this room, obviously.
I don't think there is such a thing as a website with a perfect user experience. So everyone it's constantly a game of improvement, and it's an iterative process. You have to kind of see what doesn't work to figure out what does work. Over time, you do start to learn patterns that are more successful more of the time. So you can kind of have some baseline for what will work versus what's going to be a total flop. I would say that most of our clients who come to us recognize that they have some kind of problem on their site. And maybe they don't put it in terms of we have a bad UX, but they hate their website for some reason or another. It doesn't feel right, it doesn't look good. And we can kind of help guide them in the right way of how we can make improvements there. And the truth is that a lot of our clients aren't really interested in spending money on big UX research, and that's fine too. A lot of our work is spent more in the visual space, making something look really good and just doing our best to, hopefully it works really well the first time. If it doesn't, then the UX process comes 6 months, a year later when they're ready to make more gradual improvements to it.
We'll give you guys some props too, because y'all built the Circuit website, and I feel like the whole process from idea that was in our heads to launching a website, you kept user experience really important, into the design. And so I think that kudos to you all for doing that, because that was important to us.
Thanks.
We want to make sure people have a good user experience. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk about you personally and your values. What are some of your core personal values, and then how did you end up there?
That's a good question. I think work ethic is very important to me. I don't know what I would do if I wasn't working most of the time. I get real bored real fast. I need something to work on. Being true to myself is very important. Yeah, those are definitely two guiding principles in my life.
Do you feel like you can target where those came from, or maybe from who?
I would say, yeah, that's all my family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, I want to spend just a minute talking about Michael Caldwell, especially since he's in the room.
Who is that?
This is Rich Casey.
Okay. So I'm curious to know how you first met Michael. What was that experience like? And you can use as many adjectives as you want to use. And then on a serious note, speaking to some of the biggest things that you might have learned from your friendship with him through business, life, and everything.
So Michael grew up across the street from me. We met probably when we were 7 or 8 years old, somewhere around there. And he moved around a couple of times, but yeah, we knew each other growing up. We weren't really great friends though, I don't think, until college. I was his college roommate at Kennesaw State, and we got to know each other really well then. Michael is one of the few people I've ever met that works harder than I work. So I think that was something that immediately connected us. We were both just really hard workers, do whatever it takes to get the job done. And I've learned so many lessons from him, both personally and in business. I don't know if I do the same for him, but for me, certainly it's a constant way to improve myself, bouncing ideas off him, seeing what he does. That's something that I try to do, is surround myself with. Everyone says they try to surround themselves with people that are smarter than they are and better than they are, and he's definitely both of those things for me. So it's been, and he's been a fun business partner and best friend. So.
We'll get on with you. Well, take us to, so I'm interested to hear maybe a craziest story on the campaign trail. Because you guys did that for several years, right?
Yeah.
Now, processing.
Oh man, I don't know. I can say that I'm really glad we don't have to put out as many yard signs as we used to have to put out. That was Georgia summers are not fun, guys. It was pretty wild when we were running, seeing things like, we just felt like there was a lot of room for improvement. I know Michael shared this story, so I feel bad telling what I think is more his story to tell, but back when he first decided he was gonna run, because he's crazy, he and I stood in a room in front of a whiteboard for hours and kind of scoped out, okay, if we're gonna lose this anyways, what is the best possible way we could run a campaign? How do we make this more transparent, more accountable, more honest than any other campaigner has ever done in the political space? And we came up with crazy ideas like, in the Georgia State Legislature, as an example, you're required by law to report all of the money that you get donated, but you only have to do it, once a month or once a quarter? Yeah. And we thought, we can do better than that. So we built a tool on his website that let him disclose down to the penny every single day how much money he had brought in and spent. When he was elected, we built a legislative tracker that explained this is how he votes on every single bill, and give people reasoning behind his thought process for every single vote down at the Capitol. He didn't take any out-of-state contributions, didn't take any lobbyist donations, all sorts of things that back then when we were telling other candidates our ideas, they're like, you'll never get elected, that will never work. And at the end of the day, it did work. Our first time running, we took 46% of the vote, and second time running, we won. So it was a pretty wild time, having everyone telling you it's never going to work, and then kind of turning the whole system on its head. And since then, we've seen a lot of other candidates from both Georgia and other states kind of emulate some of the things that we came up with and did. So it's been a very fun process to kind of go build out and then see catch on elsewhere.
Yeah, so it's very real-time transparency, and I think that speaks volumes about y'all's character too. That's awesome. So talk about a little bit about being a local leader, because was it last year you decided to accept a request to be on the Development Authority Board?
Yep.
So why did you accept that, and what value have you gotten out of it?
So I didn't even know that was a thing. So I was never trying to get on the Downtown Development Authority here in Woodstock. But David Potts reached out to me and asked if I would join the board, and my initial response was, you probably don't want me. I would have no idea what I'm doing. My wife convinced me, no, you should do this. You'd be really good at it. So I tried to contribute however I can. I think that something that Woodstock does very well is we try to have a very diverse group of people on leadership teams like that. So we bring a lot of different perspectives to the table, which is, I think, a good thing. If you talk to a lot of other cities, they only want lawyers and bankers on those boards. And I think when you bring in other businesses into the equation, you get some ideas that you probably wouldn't find elsewhere. So it's been a unique experience. I've only been on it for 9 months so far, but finding my footing and hopefully helping make improvements
city council in the future?
No.
Mayor?
No.
Okay.
I am not the politician.
Talk a little bit about company culture, because that was one thing I think that struck probably our team too when you guys were here operating out of the circuit for a year was the unique company culture, and I think that's a good thing, right?
As we took out the COVID.
Yes. Talk about company culture and why that's important and how you guys stay true to company culture while adding like more diverse talent and diverse people from backgrounds.
So culture is a interesting topic. I was kind of taught that you can't really make culture what you want in a business. It kind of cultivates itself. You can kind of help with that, but every time we hire a new person, the culture at our company changes, and that's a good thing. The one common thread that I think we've done a good job of at Black Airplane is we have a list of company values. There's 11 of them, and most of us can't remember any of them except for number 11, and one of the other ones we don't remember what number it is though. Number 11 is always win, and the other one that is the most important to our team is to invest in each other and expect to be invested in. Something that our team does very well is everyone tries to make sure that everyone else is succeeding and learning and doing better every day. And that's kind of guided us to starting an apprenticeship program at our company where we bring in people who may have never touched a line of code before in their lives, and we teach them this is how you become a developer. And for some people it's about a career change, for other people it's some other reason. But they come in day one and we just throw a bunch of stuff at them, and some of it sticks real fast, some of it takes a long time to learn, and it's a constant learning process. But by the end of the apprenticeship program, hopefully we have someone that's bought into Black Airplane as a company, knowing that, hey, these people love me, they care about me, they're investing in me, trying to teach me how to do this brand new career. And hopefully they, at that point, also feel like now it's my turn to give back to the company and help the company and everyone's family succeed. So that's been the most defining trait of Black Airplane culture.
So talk a little bit about process and how that's important as running a successful company, especially a company that is scaling like you guys are in revenue and talent. But there was a moment too, maybe a year and a half ago while you guys were at the circuit where you started to revamp your processes. And I know that during the time it seemed like it was a little painful, but the outcome that you guys came or the end result seemed to be very rewarding. So talk about how you developed that process and maybe why it's been effective.
So pain is definitely the biggest catalyst for change. And we have definitely gone through a few painful moments, and each time you get there, you can kind of just get knocked down or you can try to learn from it. Hopefully we do a pretty good job doing the latter. We had a project that we were working on last year. We thought we had good processes. We thought that we had, everything figured out. You never do, but we thought we had a pretty good handle on things. And before you knew it, part of the team was working like 12-hour days, part shift with a group in China, part shift with a group in Georgia. It was kind of a nightmare situation for everyone on board. And then the client refused to pay us halfway through. And we realized we might have some broken processes here. So we used that as a time, we got the whole team off-site in a room to kind of say, okay, what's wrong with the current process? How do we fix some of these problems? And by the end of the day, we had come up with some new processes, some new rails to kind of better define things, make sure communications flowed better internally between our team members and between the Black Airplane team and our clients. And I guess, the most important part of our processes specifically are making sure that line of communication stays open, because we're all about managing expectations and over-delivering. So if we're not communicating well with the client, then it just sets everyone up for failure, and we want to always avoid that. Thankfully, we've not had any more situations like that. I need something. I'm sure there will be times again when we'll need to redefine parts of our processes to continue to make things better.
So, I mean, you guys feel like that's been a big part of your success over the last year, has been processes, fine-tuning them?
Yeah. We have built internal tools for our team to keep us efficient while still adhering to processes. We're not slaves to process, so when it makes sense to kind of break process and do something that we aren't used to doing, we can still do that. We just want to make sure we're managing risk and communicating well.
Who has been the most influential person in your life and why?
There are a lot.
It's hard to pick one.
Yeah, from a business perspective, that would be Mark Caldwell, though. Mark was my business mentor at Python Safety, which was one of the last companies that I helped start. Going into Python Safety, I had never worked at a company before. I had only ever started my own thing. It was usually a one-man show, maybe paying some contractors on the side. But Mark kind of flipped my career path on its head and said, hey, come join this thing I've done this a few times, I know what I'm doing, and I was real interested in learning how he had started a bunch of successful companies and sold some of those companies. So I learned a ton from him. I learned the importance of having a sales team, which is something that Black Airplane does that most other agencies in the area haven't even thought of doing because they don't understand how important that is. So the number of personal and business life lessons I've learned from Mark I can't count them, but yeah, very influential, thank you.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about how an entrepreneurial mindset works or how an entrepreneur thinks. We interact with, this is a question we always ask, but we interact with a lot of entrepreneurs, and we call it the science and the art of entrepreneurship, where on the one hand you make some decisions that are more calculated and data-driven, but then sometimes there's times where you might make decisions based on gut or it just feels right. How do you typically tend to operate most often when it comes to decisions?
I would say that a lot of times we go with our gut, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because, typically your gut instinct is informed by a lot of other choices or things that you've seen and done already. So sometimes that's the best way to go. When you have the time and the resources to use data to kind of pick your direction, that's great. But I have seen so many times when people wait for more information and more data, and what ends up happening is they never get their idea off the ground or they never execute on anything. So for me, it's much more important to just keep moving forward, keep the momentum, and make corrections as you go.
Failure is not always fatal, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, share a major loss and maybe a major win when it comes to your entrepreneurship career, and maybe some of the lessons you might have learned.
Major loss, the experience that kind of had our processes evolve in a major way at Black Airplane, that was certainly a loss for us. That was a huge loss for me personally, just from a time perspective. The amount of time that stripped me away from my family was awful. And then we didn't get paid on it to just throw salt on the wound, but that sucked. There have been plenty of others. I've launched many websites that never generated a dime after months of work. But I've also created a lot of sites that have done very well. So most of the time it ends up coming out ahead. Major win that we had recently. We have been working with a client since day one at Black Airplane, and we really wanted to do more work with them. We knew they had a lot more work that we could do. I think they kind of saw us as maybe a small fry, a small agency up in Woodstock, Georgia. We're the only agency up here that is in Woodstock right now. Most agencies that do what we do are located in Atlanta, so we're kind of, not many people think of even coming up here to find web design or application development. But we really wanted to do the work. We had a small project we were doing with them, which was huge for us, but we kind of showed them what we were capable of with that small project and went above and beyond. And we had built an application for them that they were going to announce at a big conference that they have every year. About 10,000 people go to this conference, so it was a really big deal for them. And something was wrong with the app, and it wasn't going to make it out on time if they released it as it was. And we kind of went above and beyond for them to get them to a really good point where they could be successful. And I think in part because we did that for them, and the relationship that our team was building with their team, they came back to us very shortly afterwards and basically overbooked us for a year, just saying, okay, you're now going to be doing X number of hours every single week for the next year for us, and we hope that we can throw even more at you the next year. So they walked away from another agency they had been working with for years and threw all of that work at us, which was huge for us, allowed us to hire more people. And I think that relationship will continue to grow as long as we continue to serve them really well.
Yeah. You do it right the first time, and it's going to pay off in the end, right?
Yeah.
Well, I want to give time for questions too, so maybe a last question from me. What advice would you give to, an aspiring entrepreneur, regardless of age? What advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about starting something, or maybe even if they're at a point where they want to encourage their kids to be more entrepreneurial minded? What advice would you give to them?
One of the more common questions I get is, should I go to college before going and pursuing my dream? And the thing that I always say back is yes, unless you are already successful and this is going to be successful for you. I think education is still a very important thing to get. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to go break the bank on college. There's a lot of great options out there, community colleges that don't cost $100,000 by the end, where you're going to go get a great education and go be able to make some money while you try to figure out how do I pursue my dreams. So I kind of said this earlier, entrepreneurship for me is a little bit about risk management. If you don't really have a solid plan and the resources to go execute on your idea, then your idea is highly likely to fail, and you've kind of shot yourself in the foot before you even got started. So I'm very much of the opinion you should have some resources, have a little bit of padding before you go. Just risk it all on an idea that you haven't proven out yet.
Yeah. Well, and your story, you started in KSU, you were there for how many years?
3.
3. But then do you feel like, well, tell us why you chose to leave at that point, and maybe that'll shed light on people who might feel the same way.
Yeah, I got to a breaking point because I was making more money than a college student should make at that age, and was also facing a lot of social pressure from family to stay in college. So it was a really tough decision to make, to stop going to school essentially. But at a certain point, I couldn't do both. And I had to make the decision, do I keep doing school or do I focus 100% on business? And I'm glad I focused on business. It ended up working well for me. But I had already bought a house for myself and I had no debt. So I didn't really have to make a lot of other decisions that a lot of other students need to make at that time. And what you don't want to do as a student is you don't want to just have tons of debt right out of school and not really have any kind of backup plan for how you're going to pay that kind of stuff off.
Yeah, that's good. Well, there's probably 20 more questions I could ask, but we're right at the point where we can give you guys about 15 minutes. And so if you have questions, just throw up a hand and we'll jump in.
Dave, can you take a moment to describe the vision of Black Airplane, say 5 years, and the barriers that you're going to have to overcome to achieve that vision?
Biggest barrier we'll face in the next year or two is figuring out how to break 15 people. I think we're already getting a little bit to a breaking point as a company of what is physically possible for from a project management standpoint, the kinds of projects that we work on are very complex. It requires a lot of attention, and right now, it's mostly down to 2 or 3 people that are kind of thinking about, okay, what do we need to get done today? What's the plan to execute on this tomorrow? We're gonna need to figure out how do we bring in people that are really good at the project management part of the process in order to keep growing the way we wanna grow. 5 years from now, I could see Black Airplane being somewhere between 25 and 50 employees. My hope for then is that we've got a killer team that is, we like to be really autonomous. Everyone kind of has their own way of working. We don't have set hours at our office, so people come in, when it makes the most sense for them. That way they can spend more time with their family. They leave when they need to, again, to go spend time with their family or friends or whatever it is that they do. Hopefully we can continue to be that way as we continue to grow and we find out how we can self-manage with the right kind of project managers or management in the right places.
Can you try to repeat the question too, in case people can't hear it?
Sure.
So I was just going to follow up on that. I was curious about project management as you're scaling. What kind of tools are you using right now to try to manage that, and what's working or what's not working with that?
So the question is about what tools are we using to kind of manage our project management today. The tools that we use the most, some of these are specific to our industry, some of them won't be. One is called Harvest, and that's what everyone on our team uses to track time. For a lot of our clients, we bill by the hour, so it's important for us to know how much time is everyone spending on a different project. It's also really good for us because from a data collection perspective, we can see where people are spending their time and see what's working, what's not working over long periods of time. Asana is a really big one for us right now. So that's basically a big to-do list that you can organize in a lot of different ways. Jira is similar to that. We use that with some of our clients. There is a resource tool that we use called Float that lets us project where each of our resources will be spending time over the next few months. So we've got a team of 9 today. We need to be able to tell clients when their project is going to start. Float lets us see, okay, Victoria is busy for the next 2 months, so she's not going to be available, but Gabe opens up for 2 weeks starting next week, so he is available. We can start the project. Those are the 3 that we use the most.
I got one.
Sure.
Will you, how many kids do you have? No kids. If you have kids, or would you recommend for parents that they put a limitation on computer, digital media usage now? Yeah. I'm glad I didn't bring my daughter. Okay, I'll take it under advisement.
Worked out for you. The exception.
Well, that's almost better. Crushing me.
You guys have obviously set your flag, planted your flag here in Woodstock. Awesome. You mentioned most of the folks that do what you do it in the more metropolitan area. What do you need from the community to ensure that you can continue to grow in Woodstock so that your flag can remain to be flown here?
Question is, what do we need the community around us to do to make sure that Black Airplane stays in Woodstock instead of moves to Atlanta? So,
Stockton walks in too, so make sure it's.
that's a special announcement. We're moving to my. No. I don't think for us that would ever be a problem. One of the major selling points, I think, for most of our employees is we started Black Airplane with the hopes of making a company. Agency life is hard. The people that work in this space, typically, I've worked at a lot of agencies in Atlanta, and it's, for me, I drove down to Atlanta at 5 or 6 in the morning and was there all day, and the team is still there at 7 p.m. at night. They spend their lives at the agency doing this work because it's really hard work, it's high energy, it's stressful, and the kind of people that work in it love that kind of career path. We wanted something slightly different where instead of spending 2 hours on the road every day driving into Atlanta where all the agencies were, building an agency where everyone could have a family life too and go mountain biking at night or do whatever it is that they enjoy to do. So as long as Woodstock continues to be this great, vibrant place with an amazing community. I can't imagine us ever leaving this space. So I think that's what all of the great people in city government are trying to continue to do. So it's been a great place for us. The other thing I guess you could do is keep telling people in Atlanta that Woodstock isn't that far away, because that's what we come up against most is no one wants to make the drive up here because it's 5 minutes out of their bubble.
So David, how important is videography with respect to your current revenue base, and how do you see that focus changing over the next couple of years?
Question is, how important is videography in our space? And I think there is a lot of value in video. There is value in video on websites and in other kinds of media. For us, we don't do any video. So if a client sends us a video, we might, do a little bit of editing work here and there just to make a background video on a website or something. And that can be really great. It can be really engaging for people that come to the website to have some moving imagery in the back. Sometimes that's a good way to tell your story. And it's not expensive to do, so it's a great value add for them. Usually we will suggest video partners for them to go work with, and that's what we see a lot of other big companies do too. A lot of times you'll have a creative agency and you'll also have a video agency. They're two very different kinds of practices. You want people that are masters in both in order to build a really great product. I think another really exciting thing that's going to be growing over the next 5 years is augmented reality, which is kind of like video, but that's your Snapchat filters or whatever when you're holding your phone out and it puts something on your face and does something live with the video, kind of augments that experience. Tools are becoming more readily available for developers to make really cool applications with that. We've gotten to do a little bit of Black Airplane around augmented reality. It's an interesting growing space that I think you'll see a lot more of soon.
I've worked with a fair amount of digital agencies who've grown to a point where once they're pretty substantial, they end up getting acquired by the behemoths. And once that happens, the behemoths tend to be so big that they can't function within their culture and skill set. Do you think that could become a problem for you guys in the future because they'll start to attract the behemoths who may want to develop it?
I'm more afraid about us acquiring them, I guess.
Nice.
Anything's possible. I don't expect that would happen. With our last company that Michael and I helped start, we went in with the specific plan of this thing is going to sell. We're building this for acquisition. We built it in a very particular way, so it would be easy for someone to consume us. I have no idea how someone would consume us with Black Airplane. That was never the plan. We haven't really structured it in a way that would be very feasible. I haven't seen that happen too many times. I know it does happen. Most of the time in our space when an acquisition does happen is that it's some kind of talent acquisition, or at least that's what I'm more used to. So it's not that, we want your assets because our assets are our people. We're a services company. We don't have a physical product and patents or anything like that. So someone would want to come in because we've got the right talent on our team, and I'm sure people want our talent because we have some of the best people around, but it would have to be like the perfect fit both for them and for us, because if a company comes in to acquire our talent and our talent doesn't want to stay with them, they're just going to leave and it was all for nothing. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I've seen that happen where they come in, they say they want the talent, really what they want is their book of business, and because they're big enough, as we've seen this with a lot of international agencies who have now come in and acquired it, all the people who were part of that original agency are now gone. And the work, the relationships with the big brands is still there because that's what they paid for. The level of new technology has stifled as a result, and then all the people are gone. So I just want, you guys are creating this compelling agency that I can see somebody saying, hey, we're on the entire globe, we have plenty of money, what's your price? I hope that be that moment where you're just like, okay.
Hopefully no one on my team will fault me for saying, if someone comes to me and offers me $1 billion tomorrow, I'll think about it for a little while, but $1 billion, no. But today it's not part of the plan. And
Is that a fast yes for you?
I think we'll just tell Michael.
Yeah, I think that would be a very risky move for a company to come in and do that unless all they're interested in is the books, in which that case, you know, it's a repeatable process. We just go start again and build it all over again, but I'm not in that mindset, so I don't know.
Well, he's also being really humble right now too, but you guys have built a reputation around relationships too, so, you know, your team, your people are your assets, but also the way you function too. I'm sorry, I'm answering your question for you. Any other questions? We got time for a couple more.
That's so what's the process been like? Because I know it started as kind of you and Michael, I think maybe two other people, but now that you're growing and you're kind of getting to that like 10 and 12, I know there's a different shift in that, so you probably have questions. What's the process or like sort of learning experiences from being the one doing the work to the one kind of managing the people that are doing the work? How's that been as kind of or you may still be doing some of the work as well, but
Yeah, today I'm still doing a ton of work and a lot of project management. April, who is our account executive, she does a lot of project management as well, so that's been very helpful because we're kind of bursting at the seams right now with production and how much we can actually handle. We need a project manager, but we're not at a place yet where we can bring one on board. It's definitely in the cards for our next few hires, though. We probably need one or two more developers before we're ready for that. We're trying to grow it in a responsible way from the standpoint of we're a bootstrapped company, we don't have any debt, we're cash flow positive, so all good things, but we also want to make sure we're never putting the company in jeopardy. So part of the way Michael and I plan is we have a certain amount of money in the bank, so if we didn't get paid for the next several months, no one's at risk, everyone's okay, everyone still has their job. But that means that we need to put a lot more money in the bank before we hire resource number 10 and 11.
Maybe one more question?
David, you consider entrepreneurialism, and Jonathan kind of alluded to this earlier, but do you consider it to be, I see it as a talent, or is it a skill set you can teach?
Is entrepreneurialism a talent or something that you can teach?
There's no right answer.
I think you can teach just about anything. I think being an entrepreneur is kind of an environmental trait. I think sure, there's going to be people that are never going to be entrepreneurs, the person that wants to take that risk, and that's fine. There's also going to be people on the flip side that probably that's all they want to do and they never want to work for corporate or something. But by and large, I think if you kind of walked into it like I did and were kind of accidentally successful, you're probably more likely to have the taste for it and want to do it again. So maybe, yeah, I think there's probably a lot of right answers there.
Well, one final question. If the flight crew is here, who's flying Black Airplane?
Oh, crap.
I get started? You guys are stacking up more projects as we speak right now, so thank you for your story, for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Two things real quick. So if you guys have a second, grab David real quick if you want to talk to him offline. We highly encourage you to take advantage of those Delta first class seats in front of our Cherokee by Choice banner. Take a couple selfies. We can take pictures of you. Grab your Cherokee by Choice sticker and take that with you. We'd really appreciate that. And then before we go, I just want to talk to you about probably, most likely, our last lunch circuit of 2018. We have taken December off traditionally, and I'm assuming we're going to do that again. So November 14th will be next month. A real quick flash of what that might look like. So This is your brain, not on drugs, but this is your brain on music. It's a fascinating graphic, and to kind of tease who our speakers are for November. They are local occupational and speech therapists. They also offer music therapy, which is kind of a new thing for me. And so it's fascinating. Christy Estes and Jennifer Puckett. Jennifer's here. And so they're going to be our speakers for November. I highly recommend you guys check this out. Their story's fascinating. They started in their homes separately over 10 years ago and decided, hey, we're friends, we both do something similar, why don't we join forces? And now with an 11,000 square foot building in Hickory Flat, 2,000 clients a month, if my numbers are right, they're doing amazing things for kids with ADHD and autism. And visits, excuse me, 2,000 visits, not 2,000 clients. But it's a fascinating story. I think you guys would really enjoy it. And so if you want to learn more, I'll leave this slide up for the next couple minutes. You can take a picture of it and get the link. November 14th, 11:30 to 1 o'clock right here at the circuit. And we appreciate you guys being here. Stick around for a few minutes, talk to David and the team, and thank y'all so much.